Well, the ABC, taxpayer-funded, still claims with a straight face that it's not biased. It lies, of course, you know it, because it surely can't be that stupid to think it's balanced. Its chairman even praises ABC journalist Louise Milligan, particularly on ABC TV and in a book, falsely smeared the innocent Cardinal George Pell as a pedophile, with not a single ABC journalist or presenter defending Pell. Not one. Well, Louise Milligan was back at it again last night, not this time sliming some Conservative, but promoting female independents who were elected at the last federal election, and especially the so-called teal independent Monique Ryan, who's a global warming extremist. Well, for Louise Milligan, this was a story of the sisterhood wins. And the star of her show was, yes, it's on Four Corners, Monique Ryan, who got not a word of criticism from Milligan, even when she shut a female staffer in a cupboard, something that Louise Milligan surely wouldn't forgive if a man did, you know. And when Ryan called for an exorcism to rid her office of the previous occupant, former Treasurer Josh Frydenberg, well, I would call it spiteful, but to Louise Milligan of the ABC, it was just a little bit of fun.
She has a fairly wicked sense of humour.
You can fit in there. Presumably.
There's a mirror. That'll be handy.
A letter? No. We will need to make this our space. I wanted to have a welcome party and a smoking ceremony. We need to work on a feng shui. Yeah.
Exorcism.
Was that exorcism?
I might get Father Des from up the road through with some holy water.
Joining me on Newswatch is Gerard Henderson, head of the Sydney Institute, columnist with the Australian and author of the Media Watchdog blog. Gerard, your reaction to the Four Corners love-in last night on Monday night with the independents and especially Monique Ryan. It's Tuesday, it was yesterday.
Well, it was a love-in and it wasn't very informative. It broke no news and it really focused on the wrong issue. If you're interested in the independents, current independents, you focus on the Senate, not on the House of Representatives. And then it showed a lack of grace, I think. Dr. Ryan had a terrific victory in Kooyong, but there's no reason for a winner to mock someone like Josh Frydenberg, who was one of the most significant Australian politicians of recent memory, and he lost, as did a lot of his colleagues, but there's no reason to laugh at them. And to talk about an exorcism, I mean, it just lacks grace and, may I say, lacks manners. It just wasn't necessary,
absolutely,
and it wasn't funny.
True, and I know on Media Watchdog blog how attentive you are to good manners. But one particular thing that you drew my attention to, Gerard Henderson, was you had this whole show on Four Corners, 48 minutes long, and not once did it mention who chose and funded the teal independents like Monique Ryan, even when it was talking about the money. Have a look at this.
3,000 people donated a war chest to Monique Ryan's campaign of $1.1 million, from pensioners at $5 a month to a single donor who gave $115,000. Peter Garnick was crowned the campaign's wallet whisperer.
Well, people were donating every fortnight, every month, and we would go back to people a month later, and people would say, yes, I'm willing to help again. The intensity, the sense of urgency was just nothing I'd ever experienced before.
Gerard, what was missing from that heart-wrenching, inspiring story that the ABC told of Monique Ryan being funded by pensioners?
Yeah, well, there were these massively wealthy people in Kooyong saying they were picking up money from pensioners to fund it. And what was missing was any reference to Mr. Simon Holmes à Court. It's like he never existed. But we know from a profile in The Good Weekend that he was present in the room when effectively Monique Ryan was chosen as the candidate. And we know he must have, his organisation, Climate 200, and there was no reference to that either, must have put in on their own figures something like at least $1.5 million into the Kooyong campaign. Louise Milligan didn't even mention either Mr. Holmes à Court or Climate 200, and they focused on some money coming from some pensioners. I mean, that was just unprofessional journalism. If you want to know why the teal independence was so independent, you cannot overlook the fact that all of the ones who succeeded got massively funded, and funding beyond what the Liberal Party in Victoria, New South Wales and Western Australia respectively could afford. It's a complete omission of the key story. And
That's
focusing
amazing.
on the trivia of people drinking champagne in multi houses in Kooyong without mentioning, who's funding the joint. So I just thought it was very unprofessional.
All these pensioners they're talking about, Gerard. Well, all these pensions they're talking about, they took the money from. Did they fund for? Are they paying for this champagne that these teals are toasting themselves to? The whole thing's a joke.
Yeah, I didn't see anything on the program. No.
Now listen, the teal independents who have been elected to the House of Representatives, you make the distinction with the Senate, but she focused on Monique Ryan's in the House of Reps, actually have no power. Labor does not need their votes. But again, Louise Milligan and the ABC, they disagree. Have a look at this.
During her first ever question to the government, it's clear from the opposition jeers that the Liberal Party won't soon let this woman forget that she took out one of their brightest political stars.
COVID-19 infections in this country are at a record high and increasing. Can the Minister please explain how he proposes to manage the oncoming national significant burden of disability and chronic illness? Put your masks on. From repeated infection.
Order.
From repeated infection with COVID-19.
Put Your Masks On went viral within hours. It was a compelling first glimpse at how this new breed of politicians might wield their power.
Gerard, is the ABC's Louise Milligan right that this was a compelling glimpse of a teal independent wielding her power?
Yeah. Well, Monique Ryan went in with the promise that what she wanted to do was to reduce Australia's carbon emissions by 60% by 2030, and she ends up lecturing people by pointing at it and saying, put on your mask. Now, the point is, no one did put on their mask, but Louise Milligan presents a Member of Parliament telling another Member of Parliament to put on their mask as an exhibit of her immense power. And if you had a look at the program, there are a lot of images there where Monique Ryan was talking to people without any mask on herself. But the idea that you can be powerful in this country by instructing people to put on their mask, I can walk out of this studio today and instruct everyone to put on their mask. I'll be the most powerful person in Sydney. I mean, it's just bizarre. I don't know how it got through executive producers and editors. It's just a Milligan fantasy, an absolute fantasy that's power. There's nothing to do with power. It's probably been a bit impolite, but it's nothing to do with power.
Well, Gerard Henderson, I have to say, I think you're right. I think you're right. We don't have time to get on to the Paul Barry thing last night on Media Watch. I'll have to perhaps do that with you next week, or maybe I'll do it later in this week. But keep polite, Gerard. Keep polite. Hold the banner up high for politeness. Thank you so much for your time.